Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. Prime Minister Imran Khan was on his official visit yesterday to Afghanistan, his maiden visit to Afghanistan for that matter. And the optics were very interesting, very important. Prime Minister's meeting with the Afghan President, Ashraf Ghani, the Vice President, Amrullah Saleh, and then there was a group photo with the cricket team, Afghan cricket team. I would say that photo of Prime Minister with the Afghan President, Vice President and the cricket team just summed up the visit and also Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan. Having concern for what is happening in Afghanistan, that is very important. Prime Minister talked about that, primarily about the violence that is going on in Afghanistan. Prime Minister himself summed up the visit saying that all Pakistan is concerned about in Afghanistan is peace in Afghanistan, because both Pakistan and Afghanistan are striving for it, and any other country that is most affected by the violence in the region, in Afghanistan specifically, is Pakistan. And working for that peace is indispensable, very important for Afghanistan and Pakistan. There are several things that we'll be discussing in today's program, specifically on Prime Minister's visit to Afghanistan and Pakistan's foreign policy and concerns regarding Afghanistan. First of all, Prime Minister also, this visit also saw an understanding between Afghanistan and Pakistan about a joint document that was issued by both sides, shared vision, and this vision talks about enhanced cooperation. We'll be discussing about that. The points in that enhanced cooperation are also mentioned, by the way, in Afghanistan-Pakistan Action Plan for Peace and Solidarity. The contours are more or less the same, but what is needed is to counter the negative perceptions that are there on both sides, and most importantly, the role of spoilers in the Afghan peace process. Pakistan is concerned about it, so is Afghanistan for that matter. ISIS is a big threat to Afghanistan and to Pakistan, and how would Pakistan and Afghanistan counter this threat of Daesh in Afghanistan as well as Pakistan? A few days back, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and DG ISPR also had a very important presser, and in that presser both gentlemen talked about the important information regarding India's negative role, subversive role in Afghanistan. We'll be discussing about that as well. We are joined by a special guest in the studio as well as on the Skype. We are joined by Mr. Rauf Hassan, Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Information. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Senator Anwarul Haq Kakar, member of the Senate's Committee on Foreign Affairs. Welcome to the show, Senator Kakar. On Skype, we are joined by Ambassador Ayaz Wazir, renowned senior diplomat and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy and Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. We are also joined by Dr. Hussain Shahid Sohrawardy, renowned senior academic and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. I welcome you all. Mr. Hassan, starting with Prime Minister's visit to Afghanistan yesterday, how do you see it? First of all, the optics and the statements that Prime Minister made over there, peace in Afghanistan for that matter. How do you see this?
Well, the visit contributed immensely to further improving the optics that have existed between Afghanistan and Pakistan for some time. But I don't know whether they were able to sort of dent the ingrained differences which still remain between the two countries, with regard to how to pursue the process of peace, negotiations for which are currently undergoing in Doha, kind of stalled, but they're there. On the face of it, I think both the Prime Minister Khan and President Ghani spoke in a language that smelt of honey. But I am privy to the fact that certain fundamental differences remain with regard to further pursuing the peace process, and this specifically pertains to previously, it used to be lessening the level of violence, reducing the level of violence, but now it has come to cessation of fighting as a kind of precondition, to further continuing the process, peace process. And I think that is where the buck stops. I feel that it's a fundamental difference that sets the two sides apart, because so far as the Taliban are concerned, fighting is what has brought them to where they are today. fighting over 19 years. You know, they've fought their way back. They have not begged for it, and nobody has sort of offered it to them on a platter. They have been fighting for the last 19 years, and that is the reason why it kind of forced the Americans to negotiate with them and then sign the deal, which is the basis of initiating the Doha process. On the other hand, President Ghani feels, you know, that if the peace process in Doha were to lead to success and there would be an agreement with regard to how to bring peace to Afghanistan, he feels that he could be one of the first victims of that peace process, that he may have to leave the seat. And I think that is principally what he has not been able to reconcile to. And repeatedly I've noticed, you know, in his statements, you know, that he's talking about the fact, you know, that elections have been held and he's the president and that he must complete his tenure. Not in public statements, but otherwise, you know, this is this is what has been communicated to me. So this is the important point. Is it that excuse me, the parties to the conflict expect of Pakistan to play a more aggressive, a more important role than it has played in the past? You know, in fact, you know, the credit goes to Pakistan for having initiated the contact between the Taliban and the US now, and it has facilitated that contact. Now, is it that the parties are looking on Pakistan once again to play an even more important role, that of, you know, exerting further pressure on the Taliban to cede to the demand of you know, not just reducing the violence level, but to stop hostilities altogether and then get to the table. So I will have to see. I mean, I could not find anything in the statement issued or the shared vision that you have talked about. I could not find anything, you know, that would specifically guide me to a point where I could see that Pakistan possibly is going to play that role. So it's very difficult for Pakistan, particularly because the strength of the Taliban lies in having fought their way back. So why should they forfeit that advantage? If they stop fighting, they will be kind of forfeiting that advantage. So I see there is a problem.
So, Senator Kakar, what does this visit mean for Pakistan and specifically for Afghanistan and President Ashraf Ghani, his administration in Afghanistan?
I think so. It was important to strengthen the image of President Ghani in terms of optics. That Prime Minister on his first maiden visit to Afghanistan has gone there. So the Kabul regime is considered and accepted and is projected as a legitimate entity who represents the Afghan people over there, the Republic. So as far as the optics are concerned, it went well for him. It went well for Pakistan, that Pakistan is in a lead position to facilitate the negotiation of this war-torn country for the last 4 or 5 decades. That negative image, so-called, which was brought on by many players within the region and outside the region on Pakistan, that has been morphed now into a very positive and constructive and responsible player, which Pakistan appears to be at this stage. And it seems that Pakistan is a key, if not the final solution to the Afghan negotiating peace agreement.
Right.
We do expect still a long way. It's a very long way, particularly when whatever is happening in the post 20th January outcome of US presidential elections. Though I don't foresee a drastic change as far as the Afghan withdrawal or the peace process is concerned, but we may see back from normal to normalcy of so-called American diplomacy.
So the US is reducing troops, by the way, in
Yes.
US, you know, from 4,500
Yes.
to 2,500.
To 2,000 or 2,500. And probably there is, I was reading somewhere that it has made President-elect Joe Biden's job easier. So he had to do it either way. So I don't see a lot of difference of approach as far as in terms of Afghanistan is concerned, because they are talking about their endless wars. And one of those endless wars is Afghan war.
Right.
So the Democrats and the Republicans both probably has the more or less same kind of approach towards resolving this end game.
Right. Ambassador Ayaz Wazir, talking about this visit, the threats are there. The security situation in Afghanistan is not very pleasant. Increased violence in Afghanistan. Taliban have been carrying out attacks in Afghanistan. ISIS has targeted innocent people in Kabul, on maternity ward, on a Sikh temple, and then on university for that matter. All these issues are going on. New administration in US, reducing the US troops in Afghanistan. In the backdrop of this situation, Prime Minister's visit to Afghanistan and this shared vision, how do you see it?
Well, I think it was in the backdrop of all what you have said. I think it was a very important moment that the Prime Minister to Kabul. As you rightly said, the violence in Afghanistan is on increase, whereas it was expected that when the intra-Afghan dialogue begins, then maybe it is a bit reduced. But anyway, after the agreement between the Taliban and the American, the violence has rather increased. And that is, I think, what makes the visit even more important than had the Prime Minister gone before or after, if it if it brings peace to Afghanistan. Because right now, the Afghans, in my assessment, are expecting a lot from Pakistan, that it will help in reducing the violence, if not convincing the Taliban to a complete ceasefire, which I don't think will be in the interest of the Taliban. But they would love to see the Prime Minister of Pakistan playing his role, which he said, and I quote, I listened to him very carefully when President Ghani and Prime Minister Imran Khan were addressing a press conference in Kabul. In response to Ghani's saying that peace was extremely important, or reduction in violence was extremely important for the return of peace to Afghanistan, or for the success of intra-Afghan dialogue, Prime Minister Imran Khan said, and I repeat, he said that him and his government will try more, this is what he said, more than your expectation, we will try to contribute in reducing the violence in Afghanistan. And another sentence that he said was that we will be doing our utmost to reduce the violence in Afghanistan. Now, these two sentences will go very deep into the heart and minds of Afghans if the Prime Minister succeeds in implementing what he has said over there. Because this is not the first time that the Prime Minister has said these words in Kabul. Before our Prime Ministers, 2 or 3 that I heard in Kabul when they went, they exactly said similar things, but that were not implemented. And thereafter, we saw the trust deficit increased. Now, with these 2 sentences, or what the Prime Minister said, that he'll do his utmost to contribute to the reduction of violence in Afghanistan, that for Afghanis means that the Prime Minister will either prevail upon or convince the Taliban to reduce, or the Taliban then to prevail upon the other group to reduce violence in Afghanistan. If that happens, then I think the Prime Minister has, in the true sense, won the game or contributed greatly to bridging the gap between Afghanistan and Pakistan. That is what I feel was a big hurdle between the two that increased the trust deficit. Now, if that happens, if that takes place in the coming, say, few days, and we see the intra-Afghan dialogue taking some positive steps or moving forward, then we would know that the Prime Minister has really contributed. So in my assessment, the ball, as they say, lies in the Prime Minister's court to implement what he said in Kabul, which I have no doubt, because the Prime Minister has always been saying, before becoming a Prime Minister, that the solution of the problem in Afghanistan lies in a dialogue and not in a fight.
Very interesting, Ambassador Sadiq, Ambassador Ayaz Wazir. Dr. Sohrawardy, talking about this rhetoric that Ambassador Ayaz Wazir just mentioned, that is very important. I mean, Prime Minister's statements, the way he said things, will be doing more than your expectations, this specific thing, and Ambassador Wazir is focusing on this. How do you see the rhetoric, Prime Minister's statements, and the reality on the ground in Afghanistan? How do you see that?
And this is really very important, what Ambassador just mentioned. Let me say this thing that Prime Minister's visit started with a wonderful statement that he normally says in Pakistan, and it was the first time that he, while landing at Kabul, he stated, and that was that there is no military solution to Kabul, to Afghan issue. One thing. Second thing, I must say this thing that the day this government came in power, afterwards, we are witnessing that it's probably the first time that Kabul regime under Dr. Ashraf Ghani is trusting Pakistan so much. This means that Pakistani administration this time has contributed to the peace and security of Afghanistan and sincere desire so much that finally Kabul regime has started trusting Pakistan. Well, one can see that Pakistan, of course, assisted a lot for bringing Taliban to negotiating table between Americans and Afghan Taliban, as well as right now intra-Afghan dialogue, initiating helping in initiating this thing and asking Taliban to be firmly there on the negotiating table. So this means that somehow a gap has been bridged by the existing government between the parties. It also shows that there is a very positive image at the moment in Kabul vis-a-vis Pakistan and its administration and its policies. However, being a very big neighboring country of Afghanistan with a 2,340 kilometers long border, one has to understand that Pakistan still has to perform a lot. Pakistan still has to do a lot. Pakistan still has to do a lot. But at the same time, Kabul regime has to do a lot at the same time, because both countries are somehow, the media is playing a very negative role. When I say media, I mean when I listen to Afghan electronic media, somehow they portray that whatever wrong has been taking place in Afghanistan, that is all because of Pakistan. So this thing should be this thing should be repaired. This is the need of the time. Let me say this thing that the visit of Prime Minister was need of the moment, because the contributions Pakistan made in Taliban-US negotiations and now intra-Afghan dialogue had to be highlighted. Prime Minister is visiting that area and stating that he is going to do more than what Afghans are expecting is something that is a very plus and positive point. Now, just last one point. That,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure, please.
This is last point, and that is that what is needed at the moment is that this Afghan dialogue, intra-Afghan dialogue, that must come as a success. The reason is that right there, all Afghan factions are there. They need to resolve the issue. Now ball is in their court. It is not that outside actors are not playing active role, positive role. Rather, they are desiring for peace and security in Afghanistan. Now Afghan factions are responsible for bringing peace in the country.
Absolutely. This is a very good point, Dr. Sohrawardy, that primarily this is the responsibility of the people of Afghanistan to make this intra-Afghan talks, make it a success for the Taliban and for the Kabul administration. But Mr. Hassan, talking about the points that were discussed, the rhetoric that was used in Afghanistan, Prime Minister's visit, Prime Minister also was concerned about, and the whole visit was also about, our concern regarding the Afghan soil, about the spoilers over there, and that the Afghan soil would not be used for any malicious purposes against Pakistan. And we can also recall the recent pressure by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and DG ISPR for that matter, specifically telling about those bank transactions, Indian officials, diplomats involved in the consulates in Afghanistan, that was pretty damning, that whole pressure. How do you see the situation, the rhetoric and all that?
This is the point, excuse me, this is the point that I was trying to make. I would like to, one should never lose contact with the ground reality. As recently as the end of last month, excuse me.
Go ahead, please have water.
Afghanistan was one of the few countries that opposed the removal of Pakistan from the FATF grade list. This is as recently as end of October last. And during the Prime Minister's visit to Afghanistan, my colleague has talked about the negative role that media has played, but I think there's much more much more in it than the negative role that media has played. They misinterpreted and distorted the Prime Minister's statement when he spoke about the families having suffered on both sides of the border. They misinterpreted it as him having talked about a fake border, that it does not exist. So it's like back to the Durand line thing and all that. So I still believe that the two countries possibly have not reached that state where they could say that there is enough trust between them to move forward, and a lot needs to be done. Now, coming to your question, yes, there are spoilers, and there are multiple spoilers operating in Afghanistan at this moment in time. You talked about the ISIS. Yes, they're one of the spoilers, but who is aiding and abetting these ISIS? Who's providing arms to the ISIS? Who's providing other support to ISIS? The other countries, and that one country, that the presser talked about, is definitely there. And this presser projected or forwarded or gave to the world some incontrovertible evidence with regard to the Indian involvement in support of those spoilers. Then let's not overlook the fact that even Afghans themselves are not very supportive of, some Afghans are not very supportive of this peace process. Amrullah Saleh, for example, has raised a private militia. He's in the process of raising a private militia on the lines of the former Northern Alliance. This is a reality which has to be faced. So I feel that Afghans themselves, yes, they have to. They're the principal stakeholders in bringing peace to Afghanistan, and that means that they have to work together. But I see a dichotomy there at this moment in time. I see a disjointed approach there. I see some factions within the Afghan government not quite agreeing. If I take the stance of the government of Kabul on its face value and say that yes, they want peace, then I would have to conclude that some of their own partners are not in agreement with them at this juncture in time. So these are very unsettling indications. So optics, good, yes, the Prime Minister's visit created better optics than in the past. Right. But I feel there are certain fundamental differences that still remain with regard to where the two countries stand. And if they are going to insist that Pakistan plays that additional role that I talked about in response to your first question, I feel it may be rather difficult for Pakistan, because yes, they were able to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table to talk to the US, but forcing them to forfeit their position of strength to bring peace to Afghanistan possibly is going to be something that even the Pakistani government and Pakistani administration would not be able to do. So I see a lot of issues there. So I think I think the government of Kabul should work within itself and see that they are able to create a level of unanimity and unity, so that they are able to address this issue with the power of unity rather than with the power of division, because there's no power in division at all, which unfortunately is the state at this moment.
So Senator Kakar, this whole, let's say, rhetoric, some people might say, sounds like that if Prime Minister has said that we might do something more than your expectations, that would mean that Pakistan is going to take the responsibility of the inter-Afghan talks or anything like that, that it is then the responsibility of the Pakistan government or the state that we are going to do much in Afghanistan. That was a statement, but it is ultimately for the people of Afghanistan, Taliban and the Afghans and the Kabul government.
Travesty of narrative, to be honest with you. I mean, I completely agree over here with the SAPM. That look, Pakistan has a limit of influence when it comes to Taliban. Let's admit this fact, let's get our facts correct. Taliban, after 19 years of armed struggle, have established themselves on their own without any aid and abatement from any major power, either in the region or outside the region. And they have survived the onslaught of the NATO and ISF presence for almost 2 decades. And that has earned them a position where they are talking, where they have been accepted as a, if not the only player, but the major player in Afghan quagmire. This is a quagmire for everyone. Everyone wants to know about this enigma. The issue is you can scapegoat Pakistan, but that you can do for a while, not for eternity. I mean, that phase has gone, that phase has passed. Now, after the Cigar report, which was published in a series in Washington Post, the entire dissection what happened in 2 decades has been done by the Cigar themselves. And 97% of that responsibility lies outside Pakistan. It lies either with the Afghan government, with Afghan players, with their own corruption, with their own governance model and structures, which was not what to talk of impeccable, they were not even of a normal standard. Then the malpractices by the presence of all these forces. You must remember, whenever there is a military, there is a war economy. And things related to that, which has been now in public domain, would surprise people. That's why $2 trillion have been spent, and they have not been able to achieve complete peace in the valley of Kandahar, what to talk of Afghanistan. So this is the reality of life over there. In this situation, if somebody expects that the entire responsibility lies upon Pakistan because the Prime Minister of Pakistan has sent a good gesture with certain words, would be too much to expect and see into that. Primarily, it is the role of Afghan themselves now. It is for Ashraf Ghani, it is for Abdullah Abdullah, it is for Amrullah Saleh, it is for Mullah Ghaibat, it is for each and every Afghan. Do they wish and acquire and attempt for peace or not? This is a question for them to answer. The rest of the players, be it Pakistan, Iran, Russia, ISF, anyone, they can be the facilitator of that wish list, and that wish list has to come not just from the mouth of Afghans, but from the souls of Afghans, from the emotion, from the heart of Afghans. They have to marry to the idea of peace. Until and unless they do not marry to that idea of peace, and if they want to have small little agendas of their own, I don't want to be cynic, or I don't want to sound like a cynic, but that I do fear that it would be very, very challenging to achieve peace in that situation.
Ambassador Ayaz Wazir, President Ghani was skeptic about the talks with the Taliban, although he agreed after the Jirga. And we also saw that Abdullah Abdullah was probably more forthcoming in talks with the Taliban, heading the whole process of talks with the Taliban. What is the future of Ghani administration, their political cloud in Afghanistan in the future? How do you see this violence and Ghani administration's future in Afghanistan?
Well, I would suggest let's come out of the past. Let's focus on the present. Let's focus on the intra-Afghan dialogue, where the two are sitting in Doha for quite some time, but they have not yet agreed upon the agenda for their formal meeting to resolve the issue. Now, that is the problem where the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban are stuck. And that is where the Afghan government expects of Pakistan to sort of facilitate more, if one is to avoid the other words. What the Prime Minister said in his presser, well, I'm sorry to say that, well, some people are, I think, simply saying that it was like a political statement or something. But in Afghanistan, the word of mouth carries more importance than anything else. And that if it comes from the Prime Minister or a president of a country, that obviously is much more important. Afghan society is a tribal society. And in the tribal society, the word of mouth really matters. And the Prime Minister
One point,
said,
Ambassador Wazir, one point, when let's say Prime Minister talks about doing more than the expectations of the Afghan people, it probably also means about trade. It means about giving scholarships to the students over there. It means about opening hospitals in Afghanistan, around the border, refugees for that matter. Of course, also giving some message to the Taliban as well. They were visiting Islamabad at one point, but not specifically taking the responsibility of the intra-Afghan talks.
if you want me to comment, then listen to me. If you want to comment yourself, then I listen to you.
No, sir, that's just a question. I was just questioning on your point that you were mentioning.
No, please let me finish. I have just started. I was coming to what we are debating on. Now the problem the problem is, got stuck in Doha, where Pakistan can contribute, where Afghan government can contribute. Or look at the past. Whenever Zalmir Khalilzad used to face difficulty, where he would fly to, where he would run to. He would run to Kabul to consult Ashraf Ghani. He would come to Islamabad to consult us because the players are there. They are either in Kabul or the Taliban leadership is here. You are very close to the Taliban. Let's not throw all the responsibility to the others. We are very close to the Taliban. I'm not saying that they are completely under our control, but they do listen to us and they do respect our suggestions. Now, what the Afghans now expect of you, that you will be trying to persuade the Taliban to accept some of the demand of the Afghan government. And similarly, I'm sure Prime Minister Imran Khan, in his one-on-one meeting with Ashraf Ghani, must have asked him that, well, you also have to make some concessions to the Taliban. You just cannot expect the Taliban to come and join your government. It is to be, a new government is to be established by the two entities, the Afghan government and the Taliban. And for that, the two sides have to make sacrifices. And the sacrifices can be made only if an honest person tries to play his role. And I have no doubt that Imran Khan wants to bring peace to Afghanistan. He has always said that the solution lies in the talks, not in the guns in Afghanistan. Now he is in that position to play his role. The Taliban are listening to you, and the Afghan government also respects his suggestion. That is what I was trying to come to. But in the meanwhile, you jumped in, and I thought as if I was throwing the ball in the Imran Khan's court. As much as is responsible, I mean, the same as Afghan government is responsible. It is an Afghan issue, and the Afghans have to decide. But like we say, that it should be an Afghan-owned and Afghan-led. Now it is an Afghan-owned and Afghan-led. The other players should keep a distance. Let the two sit in the room and find a solution, but try to, if they can, listen to us or to their other friends, because the Afghan government have friends other than Pakistan also. So they should also try to sort of convince Ashraf Ghani to make a little more concession than what is he prepared to do. Similarly, the Taliban have to do. Unless that is done, then I'm afraid if we are just here to put the blame squarely on Afghan government, I'm afraid that would not be a fair assessment of the situation. Both have to make concession to each other. Taliban are Afghans, Afghan government is Afghan, it is their problem. They have to find a solution, but we have to play a neutral role. Let's not always drum the rhetorics that we have been saying in the past. Past is gone. Look at the present, look at the past. Let's not leave it to the spoilers to derail it. It is very close to to come to a solution, and I personally have no doubt that a solution can easily be found, provided both the sides are willing to make concessions. But if they fail, then I'm afraid it will be a worse Afghanistan than what we had seen in the past.
Right. On Pakistan's role, I'll put this question to Mr. Hassan, but before that, I'll ask Dr. Sohrawardy about the timeline that both countries have agreed upon. By December 15, 2020, there would be re-energizing joint intelligence services, Dr. Sohrawardy. Then talk about on January 1st, 2021, refugees will be discussed, their credible and progressive action to start, their repatriation, and by January 1st, 2021, regional connectivity will also be discussed. So giving a timeline for the cooperation is very important. Probably this wasn't discussed earlier by the heads of the states, Pakistani or the Afghans who have been visiting. Giving a timeline is important. This also adds credibility to the visit and the rhetoric around it. How do you see this timeline specifically?
This timeline has expressed something very different and interesting. Basically, this timeline shows that the teams of the both sides, which means the Prime Minister as well as the President, in the background, they are working meticulously and day in, day out. That is one of the big reasons that this sharp contrast and exact time and dates are announced. I mean, these dates and so sharp and contrast means that both parties this time are very serious. One second thing, they have prepared in the background some roadmap, and now they have brought it to the limelight. I believe that this credit we must give credit to the foreign affairs team of the Prime Minister as well as President. It's not only the VVIP level this phenomenon that takes place. Rather, the background teams, if they are interacting with each other, they are finalizing the things. They are softening the attitude of them, not only themselves, but with their own softening of attitude, the attitude of their counterpart, in fact, results in such a drastic decisions which are brought into the black and white, into black and white. And now these dates show that both governments are not only sincere, but they are very serious about resolution of issues between them.
Right. Dr. Sohrawardy, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Mr. Hassan, so specifically about Pakistan's role that Ambassador Ayaz Wazir is talking about, how do you see that? Of course, we are discussing about the whole visit, but the statements, they mean a lot. The rhetoric, is very important. And the tribal society that Ambassador Ayaz Wazir just talked about, Afghanistan is a tribal society. So if you are giving a statement, there would be a lot of expectations, How do you see that?
Well, Pakistan's role has been fundamental to the progress made so far. Let's not overlook that. Pakistan is the country that facilitated the United States to engage in negotiations with the Taliban, right? So we played a role, and we have been constantly playing that role for the last almost 1.5 years or more, right? And we are interested in continuing to play that role. My concern is only one, which is the extent to which Pakistan can pressurize the Taliban. What is being expected of Pakistan at this moment in time, in case we want to discuss it in brass tacks? Right. Pakistan is expected to force the Taliban to either lower the level of violence considerably or preferably to completely stop all fighting, all hostilities, and then settle it all on the negotiating table. Now, will Taliban do that in spite of the pressure that Pakistan may be in a position to exert on them? I feel that, as I said in response to your question number 2, that Taliban have fought their way back in the battleground. They have not fought their way back on the negotiating table. So this is their position of strength. Like my colleague also said, this is fundamental. So will they forfeit that position of strength to a government that they do not trust? They're still not engaged directly with the government of Kabul.
Right.
That is a fundamental question. So I feel, irrespective of what Pakistan may actually want to do, and I know that Pakistan desperately wants peace in Afghanistan, there's absolutely no ambiguity in my mind about it. And Pakistan will do everything to bring peace to Afghanistan, like it has done in the past 2 years and even before that. But there is a limit to what Pakistan can do. I'm only trying to talk about that. Where is that limit? I feel that the distance that Pakistan has covered with regard to forcing the Taliban to do what has already been done, possibly may be the limit. And it may be very difficult for it to go any further and actually pressurize the Taliban further that, all right, no, you have to do this. Will Pakistan do that? I'm sure Pakistan will try. I'm sure Pakistan will engage further with the Taliban. I am sure Pakistan is, as I said, interested in bringing peace to Afghanistan, and it has put in so much of hard labor to bring peace to Afghanistan. So obviously Pakistan would like to see it succeeding and peace returning to Afghanistan. So it will do. But my personal appraisal is, which I want to share with my colleagues, is that I think it may not be possible for Pakistan to exert that kind of pressure on Taliban where they completely cease all hostilities and say, all right, we will decide it on the negotiating table, because the strength, Taliban's strength, is in the battlefield, has been in the battlefield for the last 2 decades.
2 decades. And Senator Kakar, this is for the Taliban to decide, you know. And there is this general perception in the region that Taliban would rather not accept the Kabul administration at the moment. There might be some interim setup in future. President Ghani might not be acceptable to the Taliban. So it is for the Taliban and for the Kabul administration to decide the contours of, you know, and the framework of intra-Afghan talks. We can, as SAPM just mentioned, we can ask them to some extent, but that is for the Taliban to decide. You know.
I fully agree to this. I mean, look, all the answers and the solutions lies within intra-Afghan dialogue.
Absolutely.
And when I say so, what actually I mean is that at this moment when we are having this conversation, Taliban do not recognize Kabul government as a legitimate government which represents Afghan people.
There you are.
So they have to start from some point. They do not recognize that constitution. They do not recognize that political system which is being in place. According to them, that the entire facade has been created by the military might of NATO and ISAF. And as that military might wouldn't be there in the future, what will guarantee that structure? The guarantee of that structure should come from the will of Afghan people. And when you talk of the will of Afghan people, then the Afghans have to negotiate and talk about the political structure, talk about the constitution. There is a one traditional way and a forum of doing that is through Loya Jirga, which is Grand Jirga, they call it. But they have to agree on basic contours on which they have not agreed yet. So far. So it is not for Pakistan or for anyone else.
That's
I mean, if tomorrow Russia starts pressurizing Ghani on something, or Northern Alliance being pressurized by Iran and Taliban by Pakistan, so where is that neutrality? Where is that Afghan-led and Afghan-owned? It has to come. This is what we were trying to put the responsibility or onus on Afghans, not on Afghan Taliban, on entire Afghan leadership, be it in shape of Mr. Ghani, whether they represent Republic or Emirat, whatever, you know. But the responsibility lies on them. They have to decide and choose. Do they want peace, or a particular political system is more important for them, for which they are willing to wage a war of another 2 or 3 or 4 decades? It is for them to decide. It is not for us. We cannot force them on that.
So this is very interesting. But my last question: this perception generally that is projected, you know, regionally perhaps, that, you know, Afghans want to talk, but regionally some players are not letting them, you know, talk to each other and all this. How do you see that?
We talked about the spoilers.
Yeah.
I think that basically you're referring to the spoilers. Yes, they are. Look, there's one country which has been kept out of this dialogue. That is the country that expected that any resolution in Afghanistan will not be without their consent and their involvement. And that actually, so far, where we are today, it has happened without that country being directly involved in any of the things. So consequently, there's a lot of frustration. And obviously, the investment that they have made in Afghanistan over the past years, and the activities which they carry forth from the Afghan soil against Pakistan, they would definitely be interested in carrying them on.
Yes,
they would not
yes.
be interested in stopping them. So obviously, they're not interested in peace returning to Afghanistan along the lines that we are currently working on. So they will continue to try to sabotage the peace deal. This is what they are doing. As I said, you know, who's funding them? Of course, India is funding them. Of course, India is the principal spoiler in Afghanistan at this moment in time. And of course, elements within the Afghan government are in league with India. That is the most important thing, and that is, I think, what my colleague is also talking about: unity within the Afghan zone to be able to do it. So, on the one hand, they expect Pakistan to do it, and on the other hand, they are in league with Pakistan's principal enemy, to sabotage the process of peace.
Right.
So, this is the predicament there,
And
and
I
this is
think-
what we have to resolve.
So when, let's say, our understanding with them mentions that there should be no malicious purposes, for which the Afghan soil should be used, this is specifically what we are focusing on. Senator Kakar, briefly, what's your take on this?
I mean, you have to identify those vested interests which are there within the Afghan government structure. You should remember that the NDS is a satellite office of RAW. They finance them, they fund them, they train them, and the only focus for the activities of the NDS is not to counter either Taliban or ISIS within Afghanistan. Rather, their target is more to destabilize Pakistan.
Yes.
Their entire financial structure and their training depends on operations being either operated in Balochistan or in Sindh for that matter, or playing on other fault lines within Pakistan. So this attitude needs to be shunned away, this needs to be surrendered, and a new restart is required if you want a genuine peace in the region.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting
Mr.
us.
Hassan, pleasure
Anytime.
having you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Senator Kakar, thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show. And thank you, Mr. Ayaz Wazir, for joining us. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.